Good day, my friends. It's Ray back at CigarClimatology. Today, or real quick, we're going to go over some of the items necessary to install and finish one of my CigarClimatology kits. We don't really need a vast number of tools, but there are several things that you will need in order to complete the kit. A drill will be one of them, because typically we're going to be drilling through the backside of the cooler to allow access from the wires from the inside to the outside. And I do not have an I/O junction box handy for you to look at, so but that's the box that we use essentially as a junction or as a cover to bring the wires from the inside to the outside and vice versa. So we'll need one of those. Typically I supply a piece of conduit that's married to a flange, and that conduit is 3/4 of an inch. It's 3/4 of an inch PVC, meaning that the hole is 29 millimeters or 1 1/8 diameter. So a 1 1/8 diameter hole saw is definitely necessary. That is, of course, unless I use a smaller piece of conduit, which is something that I might tell you about, or we might have discussed in some particular circumstances where we just need the smaller conduit. This gives us enough room to pass the wires back and forth without crowding them. Now, typically we also drill a hole or use a hole saw to put a hole in the back cover. There might be a back cover that covers the compressor area, and there are a couple of options there. We can either remove the cover completely, or what we can do is we can drill a hole through those. Now again, I like to have plenty of room to work, so typically I supply this bushing for that hole, and this would keep the wires from getting chafed against the very thin or very sharp metal, so that they don't short out. And if that's the case, what we use is this 1 3/8 35 millimeter hole saw. That will go ahead and fit this bushing just fine. Now, again, you don't necessarily need to get both of these hole saws, or if I understand some people in some countries have these are extremely expensive or difficult to find. You can go ahead and look, and if they're really pricey, these are not very expensive for me, even with a arbor. They're probably around 20 bucks. So if you need me to acquire any of these tools and you need me to supply them in the kit, all you would need to do is let me know. We have a number of nuts and bolts, obviously, in the kit. I use a lot of nylon fasteners, and I do like these socket head type nylon fasteners. This particular fastener, this guy uses a 9/64 Allen head. Okay, so one of those would be useful to you. Now again, a lot of these fasteners, especially the nylon ones, can almost be done finger tight. Okay, usually I don't tighten them to the point where they strip, because of course they can strip. So many times you can just get in there with your fingers and you can undo them. So you don't necessarily need the driver if you don't want to go get it. A lot of the smaller fasteners that I use, let's see if I have something handy. I got a whole box of them here. Here's one. Is a very small stainless steel button head fastener, and that's the same thing. That's also an Allen head, and these guys are a 332 Allen. I use these in a lot of in a lot of instances in the kit to mount items like this to the cooler back. They're very low profile, and rather than Phillips, which sometimes can get difficult to grab in plastic, even though these are a little bit more expensive, and may be a little bit more difficult for you to find a wrench for, especially in another country. These are 332, and I use a lot of these. The nuts whether they are nylon or nylock or have a lock washer attached, etc. Almost all of these are number 8 screws, and the corresponding nut for a number 8 screw is 1132s. Okay, so usually an 1132 wrench of some sort, something like this, will take care of just about all of your needs with the kit. You can typically buy these separately at a hardware store. You can buy a short one if you want, but I buy a deep one, and I use one of these little hand tightener things. You don't need a ratchet or something more sophisticated, because most of the stuff is only hand tight. They're very, very small screws, and obviously if you put a bunch of torque on them, you're just going to strip them, or you're just going to break something that they mount to. Okay, so not terribly sophisticated, not super expensive. You need a set of wire cutters and strippers. That's going to be very important. You're going to need a soldering iron, and you're going to need some solder for electrical. Okay, now I don't expect you to solder formally, really, wires together. All right, so that would be kind of a pain in the neck, and I don't expect you to do that. I use a lot of these lever nut type terminals, and with them, typically you would strip about 10 millimeters, or about half an inch, 3/8 of an inch worth of the wire insulation. And what I do is I tin these wires. So I heat them up and I apply solder to them. That's what I want the soldering iron for. And you can see what it does is it joins the wires together and makes them so that there's not frayed wires. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want, but I do highly recommend it. Everything that I supply in the kit that I've wired has been tinned. It takes a little bit of extra time, and of course ultimately you pay for that because it takes me time to tin every wire. But every wire that I've landed inside the kit will be tinned. It prevents corrosion on the wire, and it keeps an electronic contact or an electrical contact much better than an untinned wire. So when you feed those into any of these types of terminals, they latch firmly, and you don't have wires, kind of splaying out and going different directions, perhaps touching other wires. So that's what I recommend. I use a very simple, this is a Klein Tools wire cutter and stripper. I probably have a half a dozen of them, and they're very handy. These things are available at big box stores for about 12 bucks. Sometimes you might need to reach in and grab something. I very rarely use needle nose pliers, but sometimes I do have them. Most of the back assemblies, what I really like is I really like square drives here, but that frustrates some people. So I've just gone to a straight Phillips head type driver here, and it's just a Phillips number 2. I don't have one here on the desk, but so a regular Phillips number 2 screwdriver, or a driver if you like to use them. And I do like to use them. I use an impact driver for many things, as you've probably seen in some of the videos, but you have to be very, very careful because you obviously don't want to strip the fasteners. They're very, very quick for disassembling things, and the speed's very important to me. But when assembling, many times I will even use the driver to get it partially in and then tighten the rest of it by hand. These drivers just switch the heads on and off, which is very convenient to me. You don't necessarily need anything like that. Again, a regular number 2 Phillips and even a standard Allen wrench or a small Allen wrench set, which might cost you $4 or $5, will typically do for you inside the set or for the kit. Now these I make for you and I supply with the kit. If you've already watched the video about mounting the back, in that video I grabbed a couple of random just random blocks that get left over sometimes from machining things in the shop, and these are nominally 3/4 of an inch thick, so I'll sometimes grab just about anything that will add up to how I want to space something and use it. But in order to make this easy for you, I make these blocks for you. There are 2 of them in the kit. Please don't throw them away. There is a radius side. The radius side would go against the radius back of the cooler, like this, like so. And then there would be one for the other side as well. I'm sorry, that would go like this. So these guys are 1.5 inch on the short side, and they are 2 inches on the long side. One of the reasons why I make them 2 inch, because this particular model cooler is going to use a fan that will be mounted in this area. Let me grab one for you real quick. Oh, where did I put it? Can't seem to find it. Okay. Well, that doesn't matter because I can just use this as an example. It's going to have a ducted fan, which is going to mount right here, all right, and almost flush with the top. So this fan has an angled portion right here. Let me just show it to you. This is one that's built, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. All right, so you can see this angled portion. Well, this angled portion of the duct actually goes pretty much flush with the shelf that essentially conceals the compressor on the back of the cooler. So let me ditch this. And so what we do is we're going to use this 2-inch spacer to mount that, and I can go into that in a little bit more detail a little bit later. But again, this was designed to just be an overview of the tools that are necessary. Just a handful of stuff. You don't need a lot, and between that and your fingers, you should be in pretty good shape. You know, obviously, if you have a razor knife or you know, some miscellaneous hand tools, sometimes they will be handy to you, but this is pretty much a minimum. This is about all I use most of the time, not to fabricate the kit, but to put a kit together, and that's really going to be about all that you need. So there's the overview on tools for the kit. These are the sizes. This would be an Allen head, and a socket or small wrench. A singular opened closed end wrench will also do. I have a couple of these small ones that I use a lot of, and that's about it. So thanks for watching. Those are the tools that are necessary.